The No More Heroes series has been well regarded for its hack-and-slash gameplay and satirical commentary on video games as a whole. As with most of Suda51's games, it exudes a sense of charm that circumvents a lot of the jank and cumbersome moments during gameplay. No More Heroes 3 continues that trend, although not as well as its first few entries, unfortunately leaving me with a lot of mixed feelings of loving the highs, but hating the lows. But before I jump into the review, make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to stay up to date on my reviews. Any comments and likes on the video also helps it come up in search, so let me know, what's your favorite guilty pleasure video game? Despite being the third mainline game in the series, No More Heroes 3 doesn't directly follow up 2010's No More Heroes 2. Instead, it's a follow-up to the bridging title No More Heroes Travis Strikes Again that was released on the Switch in 2019. While you can technically play and still understand the events of No More Heroes 3 all on their own, a lot of the dire and more serious moments will be lost on those that haven't played the prior games since they haven't fully developed a relationship with the characters. In prior games, Travis found himself fighting against various assassins to become the #1 killer. For this third game, the plot changes, but the setup is familiar. Aliens are invading Earth, and like the previous mainline game, Travis finds himself needing to rank up the leaderboard of assassins to take on the leader of the aliens, Lord Fu. Lord Fu is just as egotistical as Travis, which makes the juxtaposition all the more tense and exciting. There's a fun build-up as you make your way through the campaign, which is essentially a boss rush mode of Fu's friends and allies as you make your way towards taking Fu himself. Without diving too deep into specifics for the sake of spoilers, there's a handful of personal stakes here that make the tournament all the more interesting. That's not to take away from the boss fights you'll face though, because even though Fu is the star of the villain roster, his friends are fun and memorable encounters all the same. There's plenty of self-aware satirical charm with a handful of references to popular video games and pop culture. It can come off as a bit cheesy at times, but in classic Suda51 fashion, it's oddly entertaining. No More Heroes 3 follows the same boss rush formula that the prior mainline games followed. The campaign is broken up into multiple boss fights that follow the pattern of completing missions in the overworld to earn money and pay the next entry fee against the next boss fight. The activities vary from fighting grunt enemies or completing minigames. The minigames make a great impression, ranging from mundane but funny chores like unclogging toilets to competing in challenges. While some are certainly more boring than others, all of them have a fun sense of humor to them that makes even the more basic ones still entertaining. That's the general sense of the minigames. It's not to be taken that seriously, as most of this game feels like a story you'd find in a $3 DVD bargain bin in the electronics section of a CVS or a Walgreens. If you go into it expecting an Oscar-winning narrative, then you'll surely be disappointing yourself, but if you go looking for stupid action, bad visual effects, then you're gonna have a blast. In many ways, No More Heroes is the same when it comes to connecting its story to its gameplay. When it comes to combat, it's No More Heroes 3's strongest component. Travis is once again using his trusty beam katana that requires charging mid-battle when it runs out of battery. This means you'll find yourself having to master quickly jumping in and out of combat as you balance out the offense and defense, managing to stay alive against various types of enemies. The variety of enemies also helps keep fights, even those against basic enemies, all the more enjoyable. These enemies kept me on my toes and pushed me to change my strategy as I adjusted to the evolving battle mechanic. While you're heavily pushed to think defensively, it's a fun challenge with how often an enemy's attack pattern changes. Analyzing them for a way in was always a great time, especially while juggling the katana combat with Travis's new Death Glove skills. These fights make for a great build up to the boss fights that often completely change the gameplay in some shape or fashion for said fight. That added variety, along with the introduction to the new noteworthy foes, always kept me excited for the next fight. It's outside of the minigames and the fights where the cracks for No More Heroes 3 starts to show. The overall map you traverse feels empty, ugly, and just bad. It's not fun to navigate on your bike, and it feels more like an actual chore when compared to the other wild concoctions of Suda51's mind. All in all, No More Heroes 3 feels like a true passion project. It's evident that many of Suda51's interests and passions take center stage throughout this title, as the charm of the references, remixes, and surprises always put a smile on my face. While that by no means that everything here lands flawlessly, like seeing a kid take their first steps in life, you marvel at it despite its struggles. When talking about visuals and performance, half of this game is great and the other half is, well, painful. Let's get the bad out of the way first. The open world is terrible. The visual design here is barren, with muddy textures just about everywhere you look. The render distance is so short you can visibly see the line where textures begin to load as you walk toward them. It's not just boring to explore, it's an eyesore. Luckily, that's where most of the pain ends, because outside of the open world, the actual minigames and the combat have a sense of style and charm to them that instantly won me over. With plenty of callbacks to various moments in video games and pop culture, it's hard not to smile while playing through the interactive version of Suda51's mind. And what a creative mind it is, because just when I thought I had seen all that this game had to offer, however, another twist would find its way into the game. As for performance, once again I'm split 50-50. In dock mode, resolution ranges from 720p to 756p, a significant downgrade from the usual 1080p max dock resolution that the Switch can go up to. It gets even worse when you play in handheld mode, hitting somewhere between 300 and 360p depending on the intensity of the scene. Frame rate greatly varies too. In the overworld exploration, the target frame rate is 30 frames per second, though certain moments can drop it as low as 20 frames per second. Combat sections are luckily better, but not perfect. The frame rate target there is 60 frames per second, and while it does get close to it, it tends to hover around 50 to 60, occasionally hitting as low as 45 during the more rare occasions. Combat specifically feels great at 60 frames per second, so much so that the return to the open world segments felt progressively worse because of it. The performance does seem to be better in handheld mode, but of course, that's to be expected with the resolution dropping so low. It's just one of the many third-party games that begs for an upgraded Nintendo Switch in the future. Man, this soundtrack is hard. There's a wide variety of genres that is so hard to describe. Literally, when you think you figured out what Suda51 has in store, he'll drop a rock song during a battle, only to switch it up when a rap song that has no business going this hard shows up. I can spend an hour talking about the rap anthem Itadakimasu, which is just one of my many favorite songs among the 145 tracks in this game. The fact that the dynamic duo behind this rap went from making fan songs from Travis Strikes Again to one of the best songs in the new game is such a great story. Outside of the amazing soundtrack, there's a decent use of HD rumble throwing down against the universe's strongest assassins that, in conjunction with the music, got me in a groove. Lastly, there's the voice acting that absolutely carries the personality of Travis, his friends, and the various daring aliens here to take over Earth. The cast does a phenomenal job at capturing the likeness of the characters, from Travis's swagger to Lord Fu's intimidation. No More Heroes 3 is a good Suda51 game, and his games are tailored for such a niche market. It's completely understandable that this game is simply not for everyone. It's a game that requires you to not be so serious when tackling it and enjoying it for what it is, just silly, charming fun. While that shouldn't mean that you should disregard the performance issues and all the other gameplay issues, at the end of the day, I thoroughly enjoyed playing it despite its many shortcomings. For those still lost and scared about jumping in after this review, I say go give the first two games a shot and then decide if the series is for you or not, as their formula will paint a good expectation for what to expect out of 3.